Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in once again to Queen Ahmadiyyah TV presents Beyond the Realm. So as you're coming in, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Click the notification bell and click the word all so that you're notified each time the Queen Goddess goes live. All right. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Queen Ahmadiyyah, on Instagram at Divine_Goddess_27, Brighton and Patreon at Queen Ahmadiyyah, and Twitter at DGoddess27. Okay, so let's get into it. Be careful, everyone. I seen a video with coins sticking to meats. Don't eat the meats. Okay, let's get into it, people. Now, this, as I said, is 3 true ghost stories. All right. These spooky tales will make you feel like you're out in the backwoods at a campfire almost. Okay. The Ghost of Oxford Milford Road is the first one. Now, when Brad Culp was a student at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, there was a rumor that the town was one of the most haunted places in America. When Culp started an on-campus magazine, he couldn't wait to write about several of the area's most famous phantoms. Not long after his story published, though, he kept finding himself thinking about one ghost in particular, and that was the ghost of Oxford Milford Road. The story goes on to say that many decades ago, probably sometime between the 1940s, there was a young man courting a young woman in a rural part of town. Now, because the woman's parents didn't approve of the match, each night that he would visit under the cover of darkness. After her parents went to bed, the young man would sneak out of her farmhouse and flash the lights of her parents' car 3 times. Then her young suitor would ride his motorcycle down the road. So one night, he took the turn right before her house a little too sharp. This is what Culp says. Now, the motorcycle went one way and he went the other. His injuries were so severe that he did not survive. And rumor has it, however, that his love-struck ghost still haunts the stretch of road known as Milford Road. Now, curious, Culp and his girlfriend, who's now his wife, and a friend decided to head out there one night just to see if they could verify this tale. His girlfriend was worried. You see, she'd been completely freaked out the entire time. Now, he said she believes more in that stuff than I do. But he was mostly concerned that his suspicions, or that none of this was actually true. And he wanted to confirm it because he really didn't believe it. He thought it was just silly superstition. So anyway, it goes on to say, on this particular night, as Culp passed the abandoned farm, an idea came to him, and he pitched it to his girlfriend. How could she say no? How could she not agree with him? Though reluctant, she relented, and Culp turned a short way into the farmhouse. He killed the engine and flashed his lights 3 times. No joke, he says. There was a single headlight that appeared 3/4 of a mile down the road. He says, you saw it start to come. It was coming pretty slow, and it kept coming and coming. My wife started freaking out. It was coming closer and closer. As the collision seemed imminent, Culp turned on his car lights. He expected to see a kid on a bike or something, bailing out for his prank now that he'd been caught. That's what he thought he was going to see, but clearly that wasn't it. But he says there's nothing there. The light, it was just suddenly gone. He says they got out of the car and they walked around to try to figure out what it was that they could have seen. To this day, we still think about it, he says. I saw something I cannot explain. And if you get him and his wife around a campfire, they'll swear up and down that the story's all true. And if you ever go to Oxford, Ohio, consider parking for just a few minutes on Oxford Road, Milford Road at night, just to test your nerve if you think you're not afraid. Now, that was the first spooky story. This next one is called, Was It People or Is It Aliens? Doug Averill grew up as one of the 8 boys on his parents' sprawling dude ranch. the Flathead Lake Lodge in rural Montana. Now, as a teen, the Averill boys would run wild. He says, we rode around like a little gang of cowboys. They'd saddle up and head off to check cattle on the 3 giant tracts of land that the family managed, which formed a triangle around some of the state's most remote rangelands. Now, one summer in the 1960s, the brothers came across a ghastly sight. There on the ground were 3 dead cows neatly arranged in a circle. No obvious wounds were visible, but their reproductive organs had in fact been removed. But he says there was never any blood. It was almost like they had been surgically removed. Now, during this decade, America has been very obsessed with aliens, right? And write-ups in the local newspapers posted that perhaps this was the work of extraterrestrials. Because remember, in the 60s, there was a lot of talk about UFOs and aliens and all that stuff, right? Now, people mused that aliens had taken the reproductive organs for testing. But one day, Averill and his friends came across a lance in their path. Attached to it was a cryptic note with a threatening message that read, that's when he says that's when he thought, it's got to be people doing this. Because he read this message, right? And it was very threatening. Now, he said, then things got really strange. Over the next few days, a series of odd events happened to unfold. First, the brothers stopped in at a local bar to grab a burger, leaving their horses in the back of a stock truck. Now, the horses were packed in tightly, and the Averills were only gone for a few moments, they say. When they came back, the horses packed in the middle of the truck had mysteriously been taken out with no signs of a struggle. He says, we had no idea how they possibly could have gotten the horses unloaded without unloading all the others, he said. Now, the next day, a new wrangler on the ranch fell off his horse and was badly injured. They'd all been riding together, but not a single other member of the crew saw the accident. No one saw him fall and hurt himself. He says, it was the weirdest thing. The man's injuries were so severe that he was left permanently disabled, but yet nobody saw this happen right in front of them. Finally, the last terrible thing that happened, an old camp cook drove out to meet the brothers and ride for a day. But when he arrived, the tailgate on his stock truck had somehow gone missing, even though it had been there when he'd loaded up. His horse, Betsy, had fallen off of the truck and been dragged behind the vehicle for who knows how long. They had to put her down on the spot. Now, he says, to be honest, it just killed him to see what had happened to Betsy. We probably should have put him down too. This is what Averill says. Those 3 events were just boom, boom, boom. 3 things in a row that were so weird and all tied together because they were right after we saw the spear, he remembers. 3 things like the 3 dead cows left in the circle. Now, Averill used to tell the stories from that summer around the campfire quite a bit. But over the years, he's gotten new stories, and so they've been shifted out of rotation. Besides, they're awfully grim. But he recently got a call about a downed buffalo or a bull. It was out in one of the most remote parts of his ranch. A neighbor had seen a pack of 16 wolves, and normally wolves don't bother buffalo, but it was 16 of them. So he thought, well, maybe. He went to investigate, and there lying in a snow-covered field was the bull. But there was no bullet holes or teeth marks or gashes on its corpse. Even stranger, scavenging animals and birds hadn't even touched it. He says not even the buzzards, which is really unusual, he thought. One other thing was amiss. Its reproductive organs were gone, just like the cattle in the first part. Now, there wasn't a single footprint in the snow around it, and anywhere along the mile-long walk into the ranch from the nearest road. Now, if you ask Averill whether he thinks dealing with aliens, he's dealing with aliens or humans, he'd tell you that he's pretty sure it's humans. but I'd rather say it's aliens. Now, after that summer back in the 60s, seeing what humans were capable of, he'd pick the aliens any day, is what he says. So I don't know what that was, but it sounds like aliens to me. I mean, if you all saw that movie Signs, and if you've read the stories about people in the UK that said they woke up one morning and there were dead cattle everywhere in different people's farms, and they all had like a hole drilled into the center of their foreheads, and all of the blood had been drained from the bodies, and the organs were removed. And it was done with surgical precision. And there was no splatter of blood and drops of blood just everywhere. It was just all done very neatly. Sounded like to me that it was something extraterrestrial. That's just my guess. Now, the last one is the ghost of La Parca Ski Resort. Throughout Latin America, you'll hear variations of the story of La Llorona, the wailing woman. Sometimes she's lost her husband. Sometimes she's lost her children. Sometimes it's both. But in La Parva, a ski spot in the Chilean Andes, the wailing woman is named Lola, and everyone in the area swears they knew her before she died. Now, a local restaurant owner said he dated her. Pro skier Drew Tabak said, adding that the ski patroller he heard the story from pointed to the exact hut where this tale takes place. The story starts on a nice day in peak ski season. Lola and her young son plan to spend the day on the slopes. They say, as can happen in the Andes, a thick fog arose from the valley, which often precedes the arrival of a real storm. Now, the clouds enveloped the two as they were making their way down from the top of the mountain, and they lost contact with one another. Desperate to find her son, Lola began screaming his name as she ran through the thick fog. Unable to see clearly, she stumbled down a steep slope and began sliding towards a rocky couloir. They say by chance, a local lift operator who was returning to his cabin came across her body. He was afraid she was dead, but upon closer inspection, he found that she was still alive, but just barely. Her body was covered in lacerations from sharp rocks, and the only word she said in the faintest whisper was her son's name. The lift operator worked to carefully pull her body to his cabin, which was just up the hill. He bandaged her cuts as best he could and then ran to fetch the doctor. Together, the doctor and lift operator made their way back to his huts, the fog hanging thickly in the air at the time. When they arrived, though, the bed was empty. Just the bloody sheets remained. Neither the woman nor her son were ever found, but locals have reported hearing her wail for her child whenever they go near the lift operator's cabin. And here's the thing, Tabak does not believe in ghosts. Something, however, changes when he arrives in Chile each winter. Maybe it's the fact that from La Parva, you can see the Cerro El Plomo and Incan child sacrifice sites. Maybe it's because Tabak has simply read so many magical realism books by authors like Juan Rulfo and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But sitting alone in his cabin in the Andes with the wind whipping and the candles flickering, he swears that every now and then he just can't tell if what he's hearing is a woman or whispers in the wind. Whew. Now that was spooky. That sounds really scary, I tell you, okay? Oh, that sounds real crazy. Okay? I'm going to need a nightlight to sleep. Oh, FBI God says no human can do that, okay? Sounds crazy. All right, so that is your 3 ghost stories. Now, with that all being said, I have one more, and that is the one about the Axe House murder. We're going to talk about that one in just a few minutes, okay? So I hope you all are enjoying this scary stuff. All too spooky for me, but nevertheless, I did sign up for it, right? Hey, James. Silent D says ready and listening while working. All right, beloved. Hold on. I'm trying to see where my chat went. I think I clicked on private chat for some reason. Okay, there we go. Okay, so with that all being said, thank you, Nathalie. So with that all being said, I'm going to conclude this broadcast, and I'm going to be coming right back. Now, let me see what time I have the next one scheduled for. 9:45. It's scheduled for 9:45, but guess what? I'm going to go ahead and start it now, okay? Since we got done early. With that all being said, everyone please go to the next chat, and we're going to talk about this X House murder. Thank you all for tuning in once again to Queen Ahmadiyyah TV Presents Beyond the Realm. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Click the notification bell, click the word all, so that you're notified each time the Queen Goddess goes live on this channel. Don't forget you can follow me on Instagram at Queen Ahmadiyyah also on Instagram at divine_guides_27, Brighton and Patreon at Queen Ahmadiyyah and Twitter at DGoddess27. Peace.